Hello there. Wixoss is a Japanese language TCG that's been running for about 7 years now. It's had multiple anime series, and it's had tie-ins with everything from VTubers to other anime series to other card games. One thing it's never had, though, is an English release. But let's suppose you were curious about the game, you picked up a starter deck from the internet, and wanted to know how to play. How would you go about starting? The first thing to note as a new player of Wixoss is that there's actually two decks. There's a black-backed main deck and a white-backed Lyrig deck. The main deck has 40 cards in a mixture of spells and Cygni. Cygni are the creatures of this game. And the Lyrig deck has 10 cards, which are a mixture of Lyrig cards and art cards. Later expansions add a few extra card types, but the basic functions are all more or less the same. To get started, you shuffle the black-backed deck like you would any other card game, but you don't shuffle the white-backed deck at all. You just set it aside over here, and you take a level 0 Lyrig card from it and put it face down in front of you. Then you draw your starting hand, which is 5 cards, and then you get to do a mulligan. With Wixoss, what you want to be doing is getting rid of everything that's not a level 1. You absolutely want to make sure you fill your field in early. You'll have plenty of time over the course of the game to sort of sculpt the hand to work in the late game. You only get one shot at the early game though, and taking early damage is really bad. You fall behind really quickly that way. So you want to get rid of everything that's not going to help you defend yourself in the early game. So we're going to put all 4 of those cards back, then you reshuffle and redraw back up to 5. Now that we've got our starting hand, the last thing to do before we start is take 7 cards from the top of the deck and place them face down in front of us like this. This is our life cloth. Life cloth are the life system in this game. As you take damage, your life cloth will be crushed. And when you take damage while you have no life cloth, you lose the game. Likewise, you win the game by damaging your opponent while they have no life cloth. Finally, we just reveal our Lyrigs and move into the first turn. The turn begins with an up phase. That's when you take any of your downed cards and you up them. That's basically the untap step you've probably seen in other TCGs at this point. Then you move into a draw phase. Normally you draw 2 cards from your deck. The first turn player only draws 1 card on their first turn. You then have an enter charge phase where you can take 1 card from your hand or your field and put it into your enter zone. So we'll put that one there. That acts as your resource stock for the rest of the game. Then you have a grow phase where you can take 1 card from your Lyrig deck that's Lyrig 1 level higher than your current Lyrig and grow into it, paying the cost at the bottom. At level 1, that cost is 0. We then move into the main phase where you get to play spells and Cygni. In this case, you're going to play a spell. Jetting Knowledge. This just draws us 1 card from the deck, and it's got a cost of 0. Spells, you pay the cost, apply the effect, and then the card goes into the trash. So we're going to draw a card and put this card into our trash. We're then going to play some Cygni. There's no cost to playing Cygni, but you can't play Cygni whose level is higher than your Lyrig's current level. So we're going to play out 1 Cygni, level 1, another Cygni, level 1, and even if we had another level 1 in our hand, we wouldn't be able to play it. However, you cannot play Cygni if the total level of your Cygni in play would exceed your Lyrig's limit. In this case, our limit is 2, which means that since we have a total level of 2, we cannot play any more Cygni at this point. So we'll just move into our attack step, but since it's the first turn, we skip this attack step and it goes straight into the opponent's turn. So the opponent will draw 2, enter charge 1, grow to level 1, paying the cost of 0, and then play out some Cygni from their hand. The opponent's now done with their main phase and they're going to move into their attack step. Now the attack step begins with an arts step when players, beginning with the turn player and then moving into the opposing player, are able to use attack phase arts to interact with their field. In this case, neither player has any attack phase arts they would like to do. They're just going to move straight into the first attack, which is Cygni Attacks. Cygni are set up in lanes. There's 3 Cygni zones on each side and they all line up. So when a Cygni attacks, it attacks in its lane. If there's an opposing Cygni here, let's say I attack like that, then you compare the power of the attacker to the defender. If the defender has more power, nothing happens. However, let's suppose that we had played this card over in this lane and decided to attack. In this case, the attacker has equal power to the defender, which means the defender is then banished. Whenever a Cygni is banished, either by combat or by a card effect, it goes to the enter zone. In this case, however, we'll assume that this card was put over here. Because attacking Cygni gives the opponent enter, you don't always want to attack even if you have the opportunity to banish an opposing card. Enter is often able to be relatively easily exchanged for more resources down the road, so unless you have a plan to attack your opponent's resource base, giving them more enter just gives them more options. They can either trade that enter in for resources or use it to push offense, whichever most benefits their game plan, and giving them that choice is something you'd rather not do. You'd rather just deprive them of enter as much as possible. Now, since we're not attacking any of our opponent's Cygni, we're going to attack with this Cygni here, which is in an empty lane. This is just our enter zone. So if you attack through an empty lane, that means you go straight through and hit the life cloth. No matter the level or power of the opposing Cygni, it always crushes one life cloth. So when a life cloth is crushed, you put it into the check zone. You check to see if it has a life burst effect. In this case, it does. The life burst is this little black box at the bottom of their text box, and there's also this little symbol here. The main deck will have 20 cards with life burst and 20 cards without life burst. When you flip a life burst effect, you apply the effect, and then the crushed card goes into the enter zone, regardless of whether it had a life burst or not. So in this case, the life burst effect is enter charge 1, which takes the top card of our deck, puts it in our enter zone, and then the crushed life cloth goes into the enter zone as well. Now, the opponent's Cygni attack step is done. They're going to move into their Lurrig attack step. When the Lurrig attacks, it ignores all Cygni on the board and just goes straight for the opponent's life cloth. The only way to stop a Lurrig attack is by discarding a card with guard from your hand. Guard cards are indicated by this icon here. They'll also have guard in their text box. Generally, the only guard cards are servants. These are colorless cards that go into pretty much every deck. Not only are they one of the very, very few cards in the game with guard, but they also have multi-enter, which allows them to be used as enter of any color, which is useful not only for going into your deck and being able to use your on-color effect, but it also lets you splash off-color effects into your deck as well. In this case, we're discarding a guard card, which means we stop the damage. We take no damage from that Lurrig attack, and we can move into our next turn. So we'll draw. We will enter charge another card from our hand. Then we will grow to level 2. In this case, it costs 1. To meet this cost, we need to move 1 blue card from our enter zone into the trash. Likewise, we could use our servant because it has multi-enter, which lets it be treated as a blue card. So we will do that. We'll just take this card, put it in the trash to make that cost, and now we have grown to level 2, which means that not only can we play level 2 Cygni, but we have a limit of 5, which means we can fill in our field. So we'll play a level 2 Cygni here, and to round out our main phase, we are going to use a main phase art. In this case, we are going to use draw 2. Now, using an art from your Lurrig deck works very similarly to using a spell. You pay the cost, apply the effect, and then put the card into your trash. In this case, the Lurrig trash, which is separate from your main trash. This just costs 1 and a colorless, so we will pay it with 1 blue, and then the colorless cost can be met by any color. So we'll just pay another one there, and draw 2, true to its name, draws you 2 cards. That's it for the effect. It goes into the trash. Now we get to move into our own attack step. So we will attack through the open lane first to make sure we get in that damage. The opponent has flipped a life burst, but this effect takes 1 card from their trash and adds it to their hand. They don't currently have anything in their trash, so the life burst effect misses here, and the card goes to their enter zone. Now, I mentioned that the black player doesn't have a good reason to attack our Cygni, but we have a good reason to attack theirs. So we are going to go ahead and banish their 2 Cygni. Black tends to focus on exploiting their trash and using power-reducing effects to force through damage. Blue players are focused on discard effects, trying to reduce the opponent's hand size as much as possible in order to reduce their ability to guard against Lyrig attacks and also to reduce their ability to fill in their field. So in that case, you want to attack, even if it means giving your opponent a bit of extra ener, forcing your opponent to expend resources to replenish their hand. Is quite good since we're also attacking their hand from a discard effect angle as well. So we'll just finish up our turn with a Lyrig attack, which the opponent will not guard. They actually have a guard card in their hand, but because they want to make sure they can fill in their field on their next turn, they are actually not going to guard here. Oof, once again, a missed life burst effect. And it's the opponent's turn. In this case, they're going to skip their Ener Charge phase. You don't have to Ener Charge at the start of your turn. If you don't have anything you want to put into your Ener Zone, you can just skip this phase. They're going to move straight into their Grow phase, where they pay 1 Ener to grow to level 2. And they will use a spell of their own, paying 1 cost. And this spell's effect gives an opposing Cygni minus 4,000 power. Now, when a Cygni's power becomes 0 or below, it is banished. So they're going to target our Codart SC, which banishes it. Next up, to keep their aggro going, they are going to pay 2 to use an art. This one gives an opposing Cygni minus 7,000 power. So they're going to banish one of our Cygni over here, our servant D. And they'll move into their attack phase. Now, we have an attack phase art that could help save us a bit of damage, but that would leave us in rough shape when we're going to grow on our next turn. It would basically eat all of our ener, so we don't want that to happen, so we're just going to accept that we're going to be taking a bit of damage here. So, we get 1 hit. That's an Ener Charge life burst effect. That's another hit. That's no life burst. And we have a guard to defend against the Lyrig attack. And it is our next turn. We'll Ener Charge from our field and pay 2 to grow to level 3. Now our level is 3 and our limit is 8, which means we can fill in our field. Now, Codart SMP has an on-play effect. Effects are very usefully color-coded by the first little symbol there. If it's a blue symbol, that's an on-play. There's red symbols for continuous effects, like on our servants. Their multi-ener is a continuous effect. And then there's also green symbols for act effects. In this case, Codart SMP's effect lets us look at the opponent's hand and choose a level 1 Cygni to discard. In this case, they don't actually have any level 1s in their hand, but oftentimes the opponent will have level 1s to discard even into the late game, because most decks will use level 1s as their guard effects. So, we kind of missed off Codart SMP, so we're going to use a spell. Too bad. It costs 1 blue, and it forces a random discard out of the opponent's hand. So we've emptied out the opponent's hand, and we've got a good lineup for our attacks. So we will attack, attack, and attack, banishing 1, 2, 3 opposing Cygni, and then attacking with our Lyrig attack. Our opponent does not have any guards in their hand, so it goes through and hits their life cloth. No life burst effects here. Now the opponent's turn. Draw. They're going to skip their Ener Charge phase and move straight into the grow phase, paying 2 to grow to level 3. They'll then use a spell, costs 2, and it brings 1 Cygni back from their trash to their hand. So they'll get back a level 3 Cygni here, and then fill in their Cygni zones. And move to combat. Once again, they're not particularly interested in attacking our Cygni. They are just going to attack with their Lyrig. And we don't have any guards in our hand either, so we take damage. Once again, that's an Ener Charge effect. So we'll move to our next turn. Up all of our cards, draw 2, Ener Charge our lowest level card here. Often Ener Charging, even if you don't necessarily need the Ener, can be quite useful because it lets you clear low power cards off of your field. The only other way to do this during the game is remove. Once per turn, you can take any number of your cards from the field and put them into the trash, but you're clearly getting no benefit at all there, whereas Energizing at least nets you an Ener from the Cygni you no longer need. So we'll just pay 3 to grow to level 4. Now, while the early levels don't tend to have much in the way of effects on their Larig card, at level 4 your Larig starts getting a very real effect. In this case, Pirluc Gamma has the effect that lets you discard a blue card from your hand to force a discard out of the opponent's hand. Our opponent has no cards in their hand currently, but this ability basically guarantees that for the rest of the game we're going to be able to keep their hand completely empty, which means our Larig attacks are going to hit every single turn for the rest of the game at this point. So we'll fill in our field with a Codart RFR. It has an on play that lets us draw and discard one card. Draw one, discard one, and we'll move into our attack step. Now, unfortunately, the only Cygni that we really line up against well here is Servant D over here. The other two we're not able to banish. So we'll just move in with our Larig attack, get our damage while we can, and hope that the opponent is not able to put together too strong of an offense on their next turn. A draw card life burst. So the opponent draws 1 and draws 2 for their next turn. And the opponent grows to level 4, fills in their Cygni zones, and just launches a Larig attack. And unfortunately, we're still stuck without any guards, so we continue to take damage. Normally, this is kind of the situation we want our opponent to be in, so being stuck in the same boat as them and not being able to defend Larig attacks is not good for the blue player. So we'll take our turn. Up, draw 2, Energize the weakest card out of our field. We don't have any further levels to grow, so we're skipping that phase. And we'll play out Codart RMN. It has an on play. If we pay 1 blue, we force a random discard from our opponent's hand. And then we can force the last card out of their hand by discarding a blue card from our own hand and using Gamma's effect. So once again, we've emptied the opponent's hand, and we have a slightly better lineup of attacks. So we'll simply attack here and attack here, banishing these two, and attack with our Larig, which gets through for damage. So that's a life burst. It brings 1 card back from their trash to their hand. They will use to get back Metsum. It's now their turn. They draw 2, play out 1 Cygni, play out a second Cygni. Metsum's on play effect forces both players to put the top 7 cards of their deck into their trash. So that's 7 cards for the blue player. And 7 cards for the black player. And once again, the black player is going to forgo Cygni attacks and just turn their Larig sideways. This time, however, the blue player has a guard, so we will stop that damage and take our next turn. Draw 2. We'll Energize 1 here. Again, just to clear this space, we're going to use our Jetting Knowledge spell to draw 1 card. Now, it looks like we're getting very low on cards in our deck, but that's not such a huge problem for us. In Wixoss, you don't lose if you deck out. Instead, you just reshuffle your trash, and then if you have any life cloth left, you trash the top card of the life cloth. So you don't even get a life burst, but it's only 1 life cloth, and if you don't have any life cloth left, there's actually no penalty at all for refreshing. So we'll just play out another Cygni, use our spell to clear out the last card from the opponent's hand, and once again attack in. We'll banish 2 Cygni and attack in with our Larig. No life burst there. They draw 2. And there's going to use another art from their Larig deck. This one costs 5. But Grave Out also has the effect of bringing 3 Cygni back from the trash to their hand. So they're going to get back 1 Metsum and 2 Curies, and they'll play out a Curie, who has the effect of getting plus 5,000 power when there are 10 or more cards in the player's trash. So in this case, black has plenty of cards in their trash, so this is actually a 12,000 power Cygni. And they'll also play out their Metsum, once again putting 7 cards from both players' decks into their trash. So that's 7 cards from the black player, and that'll force a refresh out of the blue player. So we reshuffle, and then we trash one of our life cloth. Finally, the black player will use their Lyrig effect, paying 1 black and discarding 1 black card from their hand in order to give an opposing Cygni minus 10,000 power. Banishing our Code Art JV, now they are going to move into their attack phase, and if this attack hits, we are going to be defeated as the blue player, so we are going to use an attack phase art here. We will use Don't Move, it costs 3, so we'll pay the cost, and it lets us down 2 of our opponent's Cygni. So down these 2, that basically shuts them off from attacking. So now all the opponent can do is turn their Lyrig sideways, and unfortunately we still don't have any guards in our hand, so we hit our last life cloth. It forces a discard out of the opponent's hand, once again bringing their hand back down to 0. It's now the blue player's turn. We are kind of stuck here. We'll draw 2, use our spell, Jetting Knowledge, to draw 1 more card. Okay, and now we actually have a guard in our hand, so we might be able to survive the opponent's next attack. So we'll play out Code Art SMP. Our opponent has no cards in their hand, so we will attack here to banish Metsum. Unfortunately, we can't banish any of their other Cygni, though. So we'll just attack with our Lyrig to hit their last life cloth, which has a draw a card life burst effect. So they move into their next turn. They've drawn the last card from their deck, so they also refresh. But they don't have any life cloth, so there's actually no penalty for them refreshing here. So they will use Yrith's level 4 effect again, discarding a black card from their hand in order to give an opposing Cygni minus 10,000 power. They'll clear a lane here, fill in their own lanes, and move into their final attack. Now unfortunately the blue player is out of attack phase tricks, which means they have no choice but to take this attack, and they have no life cloth. That's a damaging attack, so they have lost this game. That's basically how Wixoss plays out. If you're interested in Wixoss, I'll be releasing further videos down the road about the differences between the various formats and some of the changes they've made to gameplay, and also possibly a guide to some of the starter decks that are available out there. But until then, if you have any questions about Wixoss, feel free to ask them in the comments section, and I will see you in the next video.